Chairman Wong is not in attendance today and has asked me to fill in his chair. Begin with the roll call. Commissioner Boatright. Commissioner Burns. Commissioner Ponce. Commissioner Rubin.
Present.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Present.
And Commissioner Hughes is not here yet. And I'm here and we have a quorum. Like to ask anyone wishing to make a statement on today's agenda to complete a public comment card and give the card to a member of the staff. Comment cards are available at the door. As a courtesy to other individuals wishing to offer comments, we ask that members of the general public limit your statement to 3 minutes or less. When the time comes for public comment on the individual item on the agenda, I will call the names on the cards and ask you to come forward to the microphone to make your statement. Please state your name, your interest, organization, and company you represent, if any. And we'll begin with the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, September 12th, 2024. I'd like to request a motion to adopt the minutes. We have a motion. So moved. Commissioner Rubin, you have a second. Second, Commissioner Burns. And we'll do the roll call. Commissioner Tolliver. Yes. Commissioner. All right. Commissioner Ponce. Yes. And Commissioner Burns. Yes. And I'm a yes. And the motion carries unanimously, and the minutes will be posted on the website. And we'll move to our second item on the agenda, which is the preliminary landmark recommendation of Erie Street Row in the 42nd Ward, 161 East Erie Street in Alderman Riley's ward. And Matt Crawford has presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Here today to recommend that you consider a preliminary landmark recommendation for what I'm calling the Erie Street Row at 161 East Erie Street. This is a group of 3 row houses from the 1870s, which also have important alterations from the 1920s, which I'll get to. 4 years ago, in 2020, the owner of the property, the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation, which is a national nonprofit educational and scientific organization, reached out to us about plans to redevelop the property. Those conversations have gone off and on over the past 4 years. On July 30th of this year, we received an application to demolish the building. It's rated orange in the Chicago Historic Resources Survey, and as you know, it's subject to the 90-day demolition delay ordinance. The demolition application initiated our research of the building's potential for landmark designation, and we find that it meets the criteria for designation, which is what we're recommending to you today. I do want to make clear that late last Friday, the applicant withdrew its demolition application. This is good news in that the process, should you initiate it today, will need not be expedited as would be required if the demo permit was still in place. We're happy that the demolition app has been withdrawn, of course, but considering the extensive amount of time that this has been under discussion, we recommend initiating landmark designation at this time. During the process, we'll commit to keep working with the applicant on an adaptive reuse. Should note that no one from the ownership was able to attend today. They let us know this. They regret it. So we are committed to keep working with them throughout the process. We also, at the end of the presentation, we're going to recommend some flexibility in how this building should be treated, given its location in a dense urban context. So the Erie Street Row is located on East Erie Street, just east of Michigan Avenue on the near north side. We believe it meets 3 criteria for designation, including 1 for heritage, criterion 3 for its association with significant persons, and criterion 4 for architecture. In terms of the heritage criterion, the Erie Street Row reflects the evolution of the near north side, one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. It began as a residential enclave, including many members of the prominent McCormick family who built large mansions in the area. The Great Fire destroyed all of this in 1871. Though it quickly rebuilt, as pictured in this bird's eye view of the neighborhood's mansions from 1893. The Erie Street Row was part of the post-fire reconstruction of the near north side. Here is the oldest photograph of the building that I could find, probably from the 19 teens based on the car. Zooming in, we see that the row was originally constructed as 5 row houses. The closest two to us in the photograph were demolished in 1960 to make way for the Blair Building on Michigan Avenue. Based on the Italianate style and Joliet limestone facade, the row was likely built in the 1870s. We found a building permit for one of the houses, the easternmost one in the row, or the farthest one in this photo. In 1877, merchant and Irish immigrant William Kwan received a permit to construct that house for himself and his family. Given that all of the row is a uniform design, it is likely that the entire row was built shortly thereafter in 1877 or 1878. We don't know exactly, and we don't know who the architect was. The building in its original form housed upper middle class and upper class families in the late 19th century. In addition to successful merchants like Kwan, there was Albert Day, who was president of the Chicago Stock Exchange, and attorney John Noyes, who served several terms as an alderman. These families began to leave the Erie Street Row around 1910, and by 1913, the entire row had been converted to the Greystone Inn, advertised as a home-like family hotel. Despite the advertising, 1910 census records show that most of the occupants of the buildings were boarders. The row's transformation to lodging reflects the neighborhood's waning popularity in the early 20th century, as the near north side began to become a place for more light industrial and warehouse uses. The fortunes of the near north side pivoted again in 1920 when the Michigan Avenue Bridge was opened and North Michigan Avenue developed into a smart commercial boulevard. Buildings east of Michigan Avenue, like the Erie Street Row, increasingly were converted to commercial uses or demolished altogether. The Erie Street Row avoided demolition by converting from lodging to commercial and retail uses, catering to creatives and artists. As early as 1894, a concentration of artists existed on the near north side when Anna and Lambert Tree built Tree Studios at 601 North State Street. That building is located 5 blocks to the west of the Erie Street Row. The Tree Studios was an oasis for painters, muralists, illustrators, and actors. By the 1920s, a bohemian enclave was firmly established. It was known as Tower Town and was located in loose boundaries around the Chicago Water Tower. The Erie Street Row survived by catering to this creative class beginning in 1920. That year, the J. Rowland K. Company, an international advertising firm, leased 3 of the row houses. They created openings in the party walls to connect the floors. The firm also consolidated the 3 raised entrances into an existing single entrance at grade. The bay windows at the raised basement level were also added at this time. This circa 1930 photograph of the building show all of these changes in place. Tenants in the Erie Street Row from the 1920s through the 1950s reveal that it housed a number of creative enterprising, including advertising and publishing houses, artist studios, and architects, including Philip Mayer, whose studio is shown here in 1930. That one, I should be clear, was located in one of the houses that was demolished in 1960. These creative enterprises sustained the row until 1952, when it became home to the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation. In terms of criterion 4 for architecture, the Erie Street Row is a fine example of a very early row house with a uniform design. Though painted, the front elevation is constructed of Joliet limestone, Chicago's earliest building stone. Window and door openings are arched and topped with projecting keystones. Horizontal joints in the limestone are exaggerated to create a unified design. And the row retains its original pressed metal cornice. All of these features place the building in the Italianate style of architecture. As I mentioned, in 1920, these bay windows were added to the front, and the row house's separate entrances were consolidated into the single entrance at grade. These alterations reflect the row's and the neighborhood's evolution from residential to commercial and are significant in their own right. With respect to criterion 3, for significant persons, we recommend that the Erie Street Road derives significance from its association with two people, husband and wife. First, there's Johnson O'Connor. He was the founder of an aptitude testing and research foundation, which has maintained a branch of its human engineering laboratory at the Row since 1952. Another significant person associated with the building was his wife, Eleanor Manning O'Connor, who was an accomplished architect and who promoted O'Connor's research on women's aptitude for careers in science and architecture, what we now call STEM. They were doing this beginning in the 30s. Johnson O'Connor was raised in Chicago. He graduated from Harvard with engineering degrees. He joined the West Linn Works of the General Electric Company in 1922. The head of that company realized that GE tested its products, but did nothing to test applicants for jobs or promotions. O'Connor was charged with developing a program. At GE, Johnson recalled the case of an employee who did not perform well in several positions. All of the positions she had tried required manual dexterity. Upon testing, she was found to have excellent observation skills, and she was transferred to an inspection job where she performed well. She benefited from the testing with promotions and salary increases, and GE enjoyed increased efficiency and employee retention. While at GE, O'Connor published his first of many books. It was entitled Born That Way, where he proposed that aptitudes were innate and largely could not be acquired. In 1931, Johnson O'Connor married Eleanor Manning, an architect who specialized in historic preservation, public housing, and urban planning. She was the first woman to graduate from the architectural program at MIT, and she was a founding member of the nation's second women-owned architectural firms. In addition to architecture, she took an active role in the foundation's research on women's aptitude. In 1934, she published this article, Architecture as a Profession for Women, where she analyzed her husband's research in aptitude to show that women were well suited to careers in architecture, medicine, and the hard sciences. The work of the Chicago branch of the Human Engineering Laboratory was picked up in the local press, particularly by the Tribune's career advice column for women written by Ruth McKay. It was known as the White Collar Girl, and in the 1940s and 50s, McKay was promoting Johnson's research that showed in several areas of aptitude, women consistently outperformed men. After success at GE and academia, Johnson expanded his testing program to the public to help young people and adults discern their careers. He called his testing facilities human engineering laboratories, and he opened the first of what would become a national network of labs in Boston at 347 Beacon Street. This building, an 1885 mansion in Boston's Back Bay Landmark District. My research has found that Johnson O'Connor preferred to locate his testing centers in residential buildings, but the early labs were also located in significant historic residential buildings with architectural merit. I can't confirm this, but the possibility cannot be excluded that Eleanor Manning O'Connor, who specialized in historic architecture, influenced these location decisions. The foundation's locations in Chicago suggest this. In 1938, the foundation opened its Chicago branch. That year, Frances Glessner Lee daughter of John and Frances Glessner, donated the family's house at 1800 South Prairie to the Armour Institute of Technology, which sponsored the O'Connors Chicago branch. In addition to testing there, the O'Connors opened the house to architectural students and other tourists who wanted to see the building. And Eleanor Manning O'Connor developed an architectural library in the house for the foundation's testing clients. In 1945, the Chicago lab moved from the Glessner House to the Second Empire Mansion built in 1879 by Cyrus McCormick. It remained here until that building was demolished, and then in 1952 it moved again to the less grand but still dignified Erie Street Row, where it remains today. While the Boston and Chicago locations were significant works of architecture, so too was the foundation's branch in New York. It opened in 1952 here in the Fabry Mansion, which was built by the Vanderbilt family in 1899. The foundation recently sold this building to the Japanese government, which now houses their ambassador to the United Nations. We recommend that the Erie Street Row meets the separate integrity criterion. We acknowledge that the two westernmost houses in the row were demolished in 1960. However, the remaining three continued to convey the row's historic and architectural value. The Joliet limestone facade has been painted, but the stone material shows no significant signs of distress. The original cornice is intact, as are many of the original wood sash windows, though these show signs of deterioration. As discussed earlier, alterations from the 1920s are significant and do not diminish the building. The building is located in the 42nd Ward, and Alderman Riley supports a landmark recommendation. With respect to the significant historical and architectural features, we recommend that you consider the following. First, we would say all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building. And on from there, at the rear of the building, there's a 3-story addition and a 1-story garage that are basically utilitarian, not visible from the street. We recommend that you consider approval of demolition of these additions should that be required to support a new adaptive reuse for the building. Furthermore, in recognition of the building's location within the city's highest building density, including high-rises just adjacent to it, we recommend that the commission may approve visible additions to the building to allow flexibility to meet continuing or new needs. Such visible additions may be approved as long as they're set back to what we recommend approximately a depth of 1/2 of the building lot. So the building lot is 100 feet deep, so approximately 1/2 would be 50. Any addition that's visible should read as an independent structure. It should read as a separate volume rather than an extension of the historic structure. And the overall height and mass of such an addition shall be evaluated based on the specific circumstances of the property and its context. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned earlier, representatives of the owner, the foundation, regret that they were unable to attend today, but we look forward to continuing discussions with them on an adaptive reuse.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that report. Commissioners, any questions for Matt? Seeing none, and the owner representatives are not here, we can move to public comment portion of this. We have several people that have signed up to speak. Start with Gail Spreen.
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Spreen. I am co-chair of the Land Use Development Task Force for SOAR, the Streeterville Organization of Active Residents. I come before you today to present SOAR's support for preserving and landmarking the building at 161 East Erie Street in the Streeterville neighborhood. We feel it's very important to protect our vintage buildings that bring history and character to Streeterville. The 161 East Erie building is a building which is occupied with flourishing businesses. It offers unique commercial and office space opportunities in a neighborhood which is dominated by institutional high-rises. The charm of the 161 East Erie building is its scale and setback. The community is supporting this landmark recommendation, and we are committed to working with the Landmarks Commission, Preservation Chicago, and Landmarks Illinois to make sure this building is protected. Our older buildings in Streeterville are vanishing, and they give us an understanding of history and a look into the past that no other documents can provide. People learn from old places, information that's not accessible to them in other ways. They add the charm and the character to the neighborhood. The building at 161 East Erie definitely gives us a glimpse into the past when Streeterville was just being built. SOAR respectfully requests that the Commission on Chicago Landmarks grant landmark designation to this significant building, a historic structure we feel should be protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person that's on to speak is Frank Butterfield.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Frank Butterfield, Chief Operating Officer at Landmarks Illinois. And on behalf of Landmarks Illinois, I ask the Commission to support preliminary landmark designation for the Erie Street Row at 161 East Erie Street. Most likely constructed during the 1870s, the Erie Street Row is an outstanding example of Italianate architecture built at an enormously significant time in Chicago's history, the rebuilding of the city after the Great Chicago Fire. As is commonly known, almost nothing in the area of the city survived that event. The buildings that were constructed in the aftermath of the fire are therefore our most tangible links to that history and essential to understand how Chicago refashioned itself. Many, if not most, Chicagoans are familiar with some of that lore surrounding the Chicago fire, but probably fewer realize that pieces of this history are still to be found in our built environment, visible to anyone who walks by. Sadly, fewer and fewer of these places remain. Streeterville today is dominated by glass and steel high-rises, and earlier this year, two other buildings of this time period at 207 West Superior and 720 North Wells came under the wrecking ball. The Commission has an opportunity before them today to protect one of our remaining post-fire resources for the benefit of Chicago's collective story. We ask that you please take it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I believe the next person is Paul Davey. I apologize. That's not exactly right.
Yes, I'm here as a current retail picture frame shop that's located in the building under discussion. I think it's a gorgeous building. I've waited for an opportunity to be in that building for several years. And I just, as a city resident, always like to look at the wide diversity of buildings that are available in many of the neighborhoods throughout Chicago, throughout, over 50 years of coming down into the downtown area, into the neighborhood areas. Those have always been what I find fulfilling and enjoyable. We do enjoy the remarks from SOAR and all the other individuals that have fleshed out the fabulous history of this building, much of which I did not know. I think just to add briefly to the Streeterville area, I'd like to say that our clientele coming into an art and framing shop comes from the east and the west, and it's more of a meeting, a melting pot, where they just come in, they maybe have just a chat. I think something like that would be missed in the neighborhood, where there aren't park benches, where there's very little space. Buildings are filled out right to the edge of the sidewalk. It's a comfortable place. I would like to see it remain for future generations. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davy. The next person is Jean Marie Petro.
I didn't prepare anything, but I've always loved this building. I have a double interest in this building. Not only do I work part-time at the frame shop at the Practical Angle, but I also started a small art gallery with my sister that's on the second floor. So I feel like we're just getting started, and now we're kind of like under threat of being gone. This building is just really charming. People come in off the street all the time, just really wanting to see even what the building is about. So it was great to hear a lot of the history too that I didn't even know about the building. I tried to do a little research when we knew we were coming here today. But it is a very, very unique part of the neighborhood. And especially starting the art gallery, I really wanted to make it a place where people could come to even like rest their minds for a little while, because we have gotten a lot of people from the hospital that are walking around. They have people that are sick. They see our sign, they come in. It's a moment for them to just relax and be, and they love the building. And we're trying to, like I said, the art gallery's only been there for a couple years, so I'm hoping to stay. So thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. And the final comment card that we have is Mr. Ward Miller.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Miller, Richard H. Driehaus, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We are before you today to support the preliminary landmark recommendation for 161 East Erie, those three buildings that comprise this structure in the Streeterville community of Chicago. This structure, as mentioned, comprised of three former post-Chicago fire townhouses, are important and amazing component, an historical element, as well as a visual characteristic, providing human scale to the area around North Michigan Avenue when it was still a residential enclave known as Pine Street. These are buildings which have survived almost 150 years, or 147 years old, shall we say, and have been adaptively reused time and time again over the decades, from residential townhouses to commercial storefronts and businesses. And it really has provided a special place for small businesses and to thrive and be in the shadow of North Michigan Avenue, which of course has some of the highest rents in the city, and in a neighborhood that so greatly supports our city with its tax base and its revenue. So this stands as a monument to Chicago's reconstruction after the Great Fire of 1871. And as Frank had mentioned just previously, there are so few of these that remain, and we've seen an onslaught of demolition over the last few years of these buildings pre and post fire. It would actually be wonderful to see a landmark district of some of these buildings. In addition, the association with some of the longtime owners and tenants, including the Johnson O'Connor Research Institute, really provides a compelling argument to consider a Chicago landmark designation of the structure and to share these histories of this amazing series of buildings, now combined into one building, in perpetuity. So we therefore at Preservation Chicago, along with the community, strongly support the designation of 161 East Erie, realizing the adaptive reuse of these structures in the past and the potential going forward in the future. You have our support for this landmark designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no one else signed up to speak, I'd like to ask for any final discussion from our commission. Seeing none, I'd like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Erie Street Row at 161 East Erie Street. So moved, Commissioner Ponce. Do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Boatright. And we'll do the roll call. Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Rubin. Yes, and Commissioner Burns. Yes, and I am a yes, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Great work. We will now move to item number 3, which is the report from the Department of Planning and Development on the Harris Trust and Savings Bank at 111 West Monroe in Alderman Conway's ward. And Commissioner Boatright has the report.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. The Department of Planning and Development finds that the proposed landmark designation of the Harris Trust and Savings Bank located at 111 West Monroe Street supports the city's overall planning goals for the surrounding Loop community area and the central planning region, and is consistent with the city's governing policies and plans. Next slide, please. The Harris Trust and Savings Bank consists of a traditional classical revival skyscraper built in 1911 and designed by Shepley, Rutan, and Coolidge, as well as the East Tower addition from the 1960s, designed in the modern idiom by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Located in the heart of the Loop in the city's financial district, the two interconnected buildings served as the headquarters for Harris Bank for decades, alongside multiple other office buildings employing thousands of office workers. Next slide. By 2020, the repurposing of aging Loop office buildings as well underway, but the COVID-19 crisis emptied buildings of their workers, accelerating the need to find new life for them. In response, the Loop Revitalization Initiative was launched in September of 2020 to address a lack of affordable housing options and unprecedented levels of office and retail vacancies in the Loop. The initiative uses public funding assistance to implement 3 interrelated components: the creation of affordable housing. DPD and DOH issued an invitation for proposals in 2022 to convert underutilized office buildings to residential uses with supporting retail and commercial uses. The proposals were required to include a minimum of 30% on-site affordable units for households earning an average of 60% of the area median income. From 9 applications submitted in December 2022, 3 finalists, 111 West Monroe, 208 South LaSalle, 135 South LaSalle, were selected in March of 2023, followed in May by 2 additional finalists, 30 North LaSalle, 105 West Adams, and in January of 2024, by an additional finalist, 79 West Monroe. On April 3rd, 2024, Mayor Johnson announced that 4 of these adaptive reuse projects would move forward for the City Council's consideration, including 111 West Monroe, 208 South LaSalle, 30 North LaSalle, and 79 West Monroe. The creation of an inviting and forward-thinking street is a second interrelated component. Revitalization of LaSalle's streetscape and public realm with $1 million in initial funding for the engineering assessment and visioning work is currently ongoing. And number 3, support for locally owned cultural and dining businesses. Up to $5 million in Small Business Improvement Fund, also known as SPIF grants, was approved by City Council in January of 2023 for up to $250,000 in grant funds for each awardee and an additional $50,000 for businesses expanding from low to medium income communities. City assistance to support permanent improvements for 2 restaurants and a cultural establishment were approved, while 3 other projects are moving through the city's SPIF approval process. Another SPIF funding round recently closed on September 30th. Next slide, please. The development team for the Harris Bank building includes Prime Group Incorporated and Capri Investors LLC. They are proposing to convert approximately 315,000 square feet of building located partially on the ground floor, partially on floor 11, and floors 12 through 23 into 345 residential units, of which 104, or 30%, will be affordable units. The project will also feature residential amenities, including a fitness center, lap pool, bike storage, a private dog run storage space, and a private rooftop garden terrace with barbecue facilities. The $202.8 million project is proposed to include $40 million in TIF assistance. Other proposed funding sources include 4% low-income housing tax credits, tax-exempt bonds, a federal loan, and historic tax credits. The city landmark designation would also make the project eligible for a property tax incentive to support a proposed 228-key hotel within the mixed-use building. Next slide, please. DPD undertook the Loop revitalization in part to better prepare the Loop for a new future. Landmark designation of the Harris Bank Building would evidence further commitment to this initiative that aligns with its three primary components. Therefore, the Department of Planning and Development finds that the proposed landmark designation of the Harris Bank Building supports the city's overall planning goals for the surrounding Loop community area and the central planning region, and is consistent with the city's governing policy and plans. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Boatright. Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, let's move to our public comments. We have one person signed up to speak on this item, and it's Mr. Ward Miller.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Miller, Richard H. Driehaus, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. You should have a formal letter of support before you today for the Chicago Landmark designation and also for the support of the redevelopment of the Harris Trust and Savings Bank complex. We at Preservation Chicago greatly support this designation and honor it bestows, along with the history of the buildings and the complex. This is also the site of the founding of the Chicago Community Trust, one of our city's most important leading philanthropic organizations, and it was founded in this 1911 building back in May of 1915. So in addition to the architectural importance of the two buildings, one by Shepley, Rutan, and Coolidge, one by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, and in addition to the history of the bank and its contributions to Chicago's LaSalle Street, its financial district, back in 1911 and also back in 1960 when both of these banks were built, these bank buildings were built. We very much support this idea. We also wanted to mention that there's an important two-story lobby space within the building, and we're hoping that the developer will continue to keep that space open and free and protected, even if it's not protected by the landmark designation. And also wanted to mention that on the top of the 1958 building, just for your reference, there are two open courtyards clad in antique green marble that reflect the characteristics of the Barcelona Pavilion that was built by Mies van der Rohe for an exhibition, World's Fair, if you will, in Barcelona. And this sort of recreation occurred in 1958 with the new building. And we are under the understanding that this space will also be preserved, but a really wonderful space and a surprise to see at the top of the building. It was originally part of the Monroe Club. So with this statement, we want to fully support this landmark recommendation and this redevelopment of this wonderful, wonderful project. And just one last thing, for a number of years, these two buildings were facing an uncertain future with the former bank moving to a new location in the West Loop. And these buildings were actually considered as candidates for our Chicago 7 most endangered list. And I'm happy to say that they never made that list and that they are now being redeveloped and landmarked. So thank you so much for this great contribution to our city's financial district and a really wonderful redevelopment plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. There being no other people signed up to speak on this item, I'd like to move to final discussion from our commission. Any points, commissioners? Discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to request a motion to adopt the department's report for the Harris Trust and Savings Bank and take the next step in the designation process to request the consent from the property owners. Do we have a motion? So moved, Commissioner Tolliver. Do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Rubin, and we'll do the roll call. Commissioner Ponce? Yes, and Commissioner Burns is a yes, and Commissioner Boatright is a yes, and I'm a yes. And the motion carries unanimously. It's wonderful to see these projects continue to move forward. Thank you. And we will move to our next item, which is another report from the Department of Planning and Development on the Kingdom Baptist Church in the 37th Ward, 301 North Central Avenue. Alderman Emma Mitz and Commissioner Boatright has a report.
The proposed designation of the Kingdom Baptist Church building does not raise any concerns or issues from a planning perspective. So I don't have a formal report for the commission, but I would like to state for the record that I recommend approval of the proposed designation.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any questions on this item? Seeing none, no one has signed up to speak on this item. We'd like to just move to final points of discussion. Seeing none. There being no further people signed up to speak, I'd like to ask, there's no action on this item before us to vote to continue with the designation process by requesting consent from the property owners. I'd like to request a motion to take the next steps in the designation process to request the consent from the property owners. Do we have a motion? So move, Commissioner Boatright. Seconded by Commissioner Burns. Is seconded. Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
Is a yes. Commissioner Ponce. Is a yes, and Commissioner Rubin. Yes, and I'm a yes, and the motion carries unanimously. Excellent. Thank you. And now we will move to our item number 5, which is the program committee report. Recommendation to the Illinois Historic Sites Advisory Council on nominations to the National Register of Historic Places.
I want to report that the program committee met on September 20th to hear public comments on 7 suggestions for possible Chicago landmark designation that were received from the public since the previous program committee meeting in May. The suggestions and comments have been forwarded to Historic Preservation Division staff for further review and consideration. No action by the full committee is needed. I also want to report that the program committee reviewed, on behalf of the full commission, 3 new nominations and 1 amended nomination for National Register of Historic Places. The commission's review of these nominations is under its authority as a certified local government under the National Historic Preservation Act. This gives the commission an opportunity to comment on National Register nominations for Chicago properties. The nominations listed on today's commission agenda are 2678 West Washington Boulevard, Ward 27, James C. Curtis and Company Building, 1214-1222 West Van Buren Street, Ward 34, Immaculata High School Amendment, 600 West Irving Park Road, Ward 46, Edgewater Glen Historic District, roughly bounded by Hood Avenue on the north, Norwood Street on the south, Broadway on the east, and Clark Street on the west. The program committee voted to recommend that the full commission support the 3 new and the 1 amended National Register nomination. You were provided with 4 recommendations to that effect.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Tolliver. Commissioners, any questions? For Commissioner Tolliver, seeing none. We have one public comment card that was submitted, but they do not wish to speak. Mr. Ward Miller is in favor of the project, for the record. And there being no further comments, any final discussion, commissioners? If not, I'd like to request a motion to approve the recommendations of the program committee on the 3 new and 1 amended nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. So moved by Commissioner Boatright, seconded by Commissioner Ponce. In the roll call, Commissioner Tolliver.
Yeah.
Is a yes. Commissioner Burns? Is a yes. Commissioner Rubin? Yes. Is a yes, and I'm a yes, and the motion carries unanimously. And then just going back to item number 4, the public comment period, there was one person signed up to speak for the Kingdom Baptist Church, Mr. Ward Miller. He did not like to speak, but for the record, he was in favor of the project. And that moves us to our final item, which is the permit review committee reports. And it's the review reports on the project reviewed at our September 12th meeting, and Deanna has the presentation report.
Thank you, Commissioner. The Permit Review Committee reviewed 6 projects at its September 12, 2024 meeting. All 6 projects were approved with conditions. The report summarizing the scope of the proposed projects and the committee's decision was included in your packets. This report is for your information and for the record.
Excellent. Thank you, Deanna, and I think Emily Barton has a report.
For the month of September, staff approved 96 permit applications. A total of 126 reviews were performed by staff, with the average number of days to issue approval or corrections at 6 days.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Any questions? Commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move to our announcements. We have a public hearing scheduled on a permit application for the demolition of a building pursuant to 2-120-740 through 2-120-800 of the municipal code in the Motor Road District, 3rd Ward. It's the address is 2347 South Michigan Avenue, and this is scheduled for Thursday, October 17th. And it will be in here, 121 North LaSalle, room 1003A on the 10th floor at 10 a.m. And a hearing officer will be Commissioner Jonathan Fair. And with that, I'd like to, there's no further business on our agenda. I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. So moved. Commissioner Burns, second. Commissioner Tolliver. All those in favor? Aye, thank you so much. And our permit review committee. Okay, let's do, we will start the permit review committee meeting at 1:45. Thank you all.